Today is Tuesday, July 2nd. We are now live with the latest in the crypto world. It's 9:30 a.m. in New York City, 2:30 p.m. in London, 10:30 p.m. in Tokyo, and 3:30 p.m. here in Malta. Edward Iskra and Jason Fernandez will share their expert opinions on today's show. But first, let's take a look at some of the market indicators. The cryptocurrency index, CCI 30, has continued trending down towards the 4,300 point territory. The index is down by 6% so far in July. Its year-to-date performance is a solid increase of more than 100%. The 30-day Bitcoin volatility index has continued climbing up. It rose towards the 5.5% mark yesterday. The CoinMarketCap website's 24-hour traded volume indicator has remained close to the $90 billion level, indicating active trading. The Messari website's real-time volume measures at more than $5 billion. The Bitcoin dominance indicator has retreated back towards the 60% zone as the crypto king plummeted from the recent. Assets are all trading in the red. Loss after briefly stepping south of the key $10,000 psychological level. Ether has declined further below the $300 support line. XRP traders have been battling around the 40-cent ground. $110 mark, but it holds on to the fourth spot by market cap. And finally, Bitcoin Cash trades close to the $400 psychological level. The Coin 360 heat map showcases the bearish mood we are seeing on the crypto markets today. There are some green dots, but these are mostly stablecoins that are seeing safe haven flows. According to the token spread website, the CEX and the Bitfinex exchanges have the biggest price difference for the Bitcoin dollar pair, and it is close to 0.7%. The XMO exchange has the biggest spread for the same pair, and it is nearly 1/5%. Now let's take a quick look at some of the characteristics of Metal. It is a payment application that can be used to send, receive, and earn. Users are rewarded with cryptocurrency when they use the application to send money to other users. The platform's native cryptocurrency trades with the ticker MTL. Its price peaked at close to $15 in September of 2017, but currently it trades just over the 50-cent mark. We will now review the performance of various cryptocurrency asset classes as grouped by the Messari website. The infrastructure group trades just under 5.5% in the red as assets are on a slide across the board. The media and entertainment category is the top decliner with a drop of almost 6.5%. The color red dominates this section as well. The financial sector is down by more than 5%. The currency category is no exception as it stands at just under 4.6% in the red. Bitcoin is down and it is one of the top decliners today. And lastly, the services section is down by less than 4% as the bullish Vays token provides some support for this asset class. This is, of course, where the 5 major cryptocurrency categories stand so far this Tuesday. Let's now take a quick look at the most significant moves among the top 100 digital assets. We will then be right back with our crypto experts to discuss the markets after a short break.
180 different countries all around the world.
We are stronger than ever.
Have these questions answered without disclosing anything.
AI field is mostly controlled by a few large corporations.
Much busier, bigger than ever.
In the mid-2020s. I do think that will come.
We should kind of keep in mind that we want the world to be a better place.
$15 billion a day. This is incredible.
People find a way to create infrastructure.
I think knowledge is one of the most important things in the world.
We laid the foundation for the distributed trust model that Satoshi builds on.
It does come with some risks, but at the same time, I think it's an opportunity for countries.
Individuals miss the boat on a market, they miss the boat. When the institutions miss the boat, they bring the boat back.
And we are back, and joining us now we have Edward Iskra, board member at Bitcoin Gold, and Jason Fernandez, COO and co-founder of AE Token. Guys, great to have you. How are you doing today?
Hi Leah, hi Jason, I'm great. How are you?
Good, I'm all good, thank you. Now, Edward, we're going to come to you first. We spoke previously on the show that it might be the last time when Bitcoin trades in the 4-digit territory. It has now, of course, pulled back below this 10K psychological level. So what is your take on these most recent market moves?
I'm of the opinion that this is a good, healthy pullback. I said last week on the show that I was really concerned that if we went up any more, things could snap back, like stretching an elastic band too far and getting a snapback. We had a bit of that snapback last week. It might have been triggered by external events with a Coinbase outage briefly, but I think mostly it was just people being a little unnerved by that kind of phenomenal rise. I mean, if you look at the amount we rose from the beginning of the year, you're looking at close to 200%. If you look at the amount we rose in the last 5 months, since the lows of early February, I think we were up 252% since the low. That's a phenomenal rise in just 5 months, and it's clearly heading towards bubble territory. So if we didn't pull back, I would be super concerned that we're setting up for an enormous bubble that's just going to collapse and hurt people all over the place. Instead, we had a little bit of snapping around and now a pullback to the 10,000 level. And yes, it's a psychological level. It's psychologically influential, but it's not representing a huge loss. In fact, at that level, we're still up like what, 160% for the year. That's a good, healthy gain. That's more than doubling on the year, and it's practically tripling since the low of February. So it's a very healthy gain for the year, and this is a good normal pullback. In previous Bitcoin bull runs, including twice or 3 times in 2017, as it rose, we would see it rise to a threatening level, but then pull back a little bit, sort of blow off a little bit of steam, and then restabilize as the real price discovery happens to find out what the stable level is before it starts to rise again. So I think this is just part of the long-term uptrend, and it's a healthy thing. It keeps us from going too crazy.
And I think you make a very interesting point there, because people seem for some reason disappointed at this pullback. But actually, like you mentioned, in the grand scheme of things, the price is up. It's still just above 10K right now. So a healthy pullback, avoiding the bubble there. Jason, we're going to come to you. Do you equally believe that this is actually quite a positive pullback here?
Yeah, I fully agree. I do think it is a healthy pullback. It's a decline of about 28% off its high on June 26th. But we know the gains on that day itself was something like 22%. So on the 26th, the growth was just going parabolic and it did not seem sustainable. And I think last week I suggested that Bitcoin reaching its all-time high in a month was probably a sustainable rise. I think that's still true, and I think it's still possible. I think overall, this sort of pullback was healthy for the market, because you don't want it to just run away, because as Edward had pointed out last week and even this week, you don't want to have a serious rubber band effect. Also, this sort of establishes some support at 10K. I mean, I understand it dropped just under 10K a couple of times today, but it's recovered. I believe right now, this moment, it's above 10,000, just about. So I think somewhat that means that there is that there's support for 10,000, and I think we've also seen it rise pretty quickly. So this is par for the course as far as BTC is concerned. Also, altcoins are not really on the whole losing too much value in terms of BTC prices, which indicates the sellers are not really moving out of crypto and into fiat, but just merely balancing their portfolio. And also, I hear that one of the main reasons for the one of the possible reasons for the pullback was sort of a Bitcoin trader essentially placing a significant Bitcoin, betting that the Bitcoin price would go down in coming days. High and so quickly that there were bound to be people that were willing to take a bet that it would either slow down and then sort of pull back, which is, to be expected.
Okay, so of course, overall positive would be something which might. We do have some strong opinions on my next question, and we've spoken a bit on Twitter over this. So I want to know if you are still confident that we are in a bull market, or does this last drop actually raise some concerns? Because Vays was recently on Bloxlive TV warning about potential risks that we might hit new lows. So how likely is a scenario that the bear market might actually strike again?
So I am still confident about the bull market. Like I said, I like Tony Vays, but I think he's dead wrong on this and has been wrong before when it comes to Bitcoin. If I remember, in February 2018, he said a drop to 1,300 was probably imminent, and we'll probably do that in short order. He was wrong then, and he's wrong now. I mean, certainly now he's talking about something like a 50% drop, which I think is highly unlikely. And I think to some extent what it comes down to is what's going on among these analysts is sort of wishful thinking, because a lot of these people really believe in Bitcoin and would generally be buying the dip. And if any of these eventualities were to happen, they would really be stocking up on Bitcoin. So it makes sense for them to hope for some sort of unusual pullback, because they believe that Bitcoin would then shortly rise once the market came to its senses and there was, that sort of correction, well, in the positive direction anyway. So also keep in mind that a lot of these analysts suggesting Bitcoin would go to 1,300 could actually make it happen, because unsophisticated retail investors might listen to them and decide to pull out of the market. So to some extent, not only could it be wishful thinking, but it also could be something that's actually influencing the market and making it truer as more and more people read about it, hear about it, and believe it. So as far as market analysts like Tony Vays have predicted 40-50% drawdown, I think that's highly unlikely, and in fact I'm betting against it personally.
Okay, so two things going on there. Wishful thinking, I guess, which in some ways is clouding their judgment, but also I guess it could manipulate those who aren't as sophisticated, as you mentioned. So, Edward, we're going to come back to you. What are your thoughts? What is a scenario that the bear market might actually strike back?
I actually agree with Jason on. Say that when you're an influencer like Tony Vays is, it's kind of easy to say I'm bullish long term, but in the short term it could go and hit the lowest lows it's seen in a long time. That's sort of like playing all the bases and then later just pointing back to the thing that was right. So Jason obviously has a long memory, but a lot of the public doesn't, and they'll just retweet whatever turned out to be right and sort of buff one's perceived ability to predict the market. I also think Jason raises an important concern when it comes to a bigger influencer like Tony Vays. They really should be very careful about what they're saying in their prognostications. They're not followed by a small number of people who are sophisticated investors. They're now followed by huge numbers of people, most of whom are unsophisticated, and they could be following their advice. Bitcoin already has a ton of volatility, but when people who have influence over retail investors are sort of promoting these ideas that there will be big swings, that things will fall really hard, they just amplify any natural drops that happen, and that adds more downside volatility from which Bitcoin has to snap back upwards. It just makes things harder for the actual investors. Now, it's good for the professional traders, because the professional traders know how to profit off that volatility, but they profit off the backs of the smaller traders, the people who are following these people. So I wish they'd be a lot more careful with what they're doing. As far as the Jason mentioned a big short position that somebody took. I'd also like to point out that sometimes that's not someone taking a bet that Bitcoin will fall. Sometimes that's someone who has a long position elsewhere and has decided they want to take the risk out right now. They don't want risk at the moment, so they hedge their long position by opening a short position. It could just be a balancing act. So it doesn't always mean that someone thinks it's going to fall. It could mean someone doesn't want the volatility at the moment and they're squaring themselves off. Risk management is a complex thing, and it can fool people depending on how it's done.
Well, I think, definitely some very important points there with the advice with regards to just being cautious when listening to those influencers, because, of course, like you say, if you're not a sophisticated investor trader, then definitely be careful. So, Jason, we're going to come back to you. The veteran trader Peter Brandt believes that we are still very possibly in a parabolic advance. He sees the price at around 9K as a good buying opportunity. You have been bullish on the markets this year, so is this a scenario you consider more likely?
Yes, actually, I do think so, and in fact, I think it's a buying opportunity right now. I would probably be buying the dip because like this sort of drawback is not unusual for Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has seen and the way it's sort of managed to level out around 10,000, just maybe a little bit under, then maybe a little bit over, shows that there's still something that there's a significant amount of support, and when you have 10,000 as a support at 14,000 as a recent high, it's very easy to not only cross 14,000, but then to like maybe put on 15 and 16,000 again. You're only like $2,000 and $3,000 from the all-time high, and of course there'll be a lot of a lot of movement towards that. And then once it gets there, you're going to have some people taking profits. But just reaching that all-time high would be a huge validation for Bitcoin, and the fact that the market is strong and the market is back.
Okay, and that would be a very good validation, as you say that, absolutely. Now, we're going to go back to you, Edward. What are your thoughts? Is this a scenario that you would likely consider? Do you think it's going to happen?
I don't think it's likely. I think if Bitcoin does pull back as far as 9,000, it is an excellent opportunity to get in. But I don't think it's that likely. I think we're more likely to stay around the $10,000 mark and sort of coast sideways a little bit until we take another move up. Now, of course, nothing's a certainty. I think it's also possible that we drop below 9,000. I don't see any way that we fall below 8,000, though. Looking at the trading since mid-May, there's a lot of support for the $8,000 level with lots of trading volume at that level. So every time it tried to dip below that, there were lots of people willing to snap up Bitcoins. It tested 9,000 back to 8,000, and then it blew past 9,000 to 10,000 to 12,000. So a drop down to 9,000 to me is a possibility, and it would be a great opportunity to lever in. But if I were looking to get into Bitcoin right now, I wouldn't be waiting for 9,000. I would get some of my money in now at the $10,000 level, planning to deploy more if it drops to 9. But I'm not going to hold out hopes for that. We've already pulled back significantly from the high. I think it's a healthy pullback. I think we're at a position where we're going to stabilize for a while before we start to go up.
Okay, very interesting. So any lower, otherwise you might actually miss the boat there. So we're going to stick with you, Edward. Bitcoin hash rate hit an all-time high at the end of June. So can you please explain briefly what hash rate is for our viewers?
I'll try to be brief because I am a hash rate, sometimes called net hash or the network hash rate. It's just the sum total of all the computing power being used to perform the calculations that secure Bitcoin. And that's the miners calculating the hashes for the blocks. And the hashes are very hard to find. And because one important thing to remember is it's not the actual amount of hash rate in the world. It's an estimate. And it's an estimate because there is no mechanism in the Bitcoin protocol for miners to report how much mining they're doing, how much calculation power they're putting into the network. And even if there were a way for them to report it, there's no authority to report to because Bitcoin is a fully decentralized network. So how do we know what the hash rate is? Well, the Bitcoin protocol specifies the difficulty for finding a block hash, and we know how quickly blocks have been showing up. On average, they show up about every 10 minutes, but we can look at the past, say, 20 hours and say, what is the time of the blocks? So if you know how quickly the blocks are coming, and you know how difficult it is, you can estimate how much calculation power there must be out there doing the hashing. And that's what the network hash rate is that you see. When it's reported, it's telling you the average amount of hash power that it believes is out there, estimating over the past 20 hours.
Always a pleasure, Edward. Absolutely love when you give us a nice brief explanation. That's absolutely brilliant. So, Jason, I know Edward always covers it very well.
So basically, saying that the Bitcoin hash rate has hit an all-time high competitive than ever. So a hash rate is essentially the speed at which a computer is completing an operation in the Bitcoin code. So a higher hash rate is better when mining, because it increases your opportunity of finding the next block and therefore, receiving the reward. Bitcoin is designed to adjust its mining 1,016 blocks, so that's every approximately 14 days, based on the amount, and that's based on the amount of computing power deployed on that network. That ensures that the block production interval it remains constant at about something like 10 minutes, as Edward just pointed out. So when there are fewer machines racing to solve that, the math problems required to earn the next payout and create the new Bitcoin difficulty falls. But when there are more computers basically attacking that same problem, the difficulty rises. And according to BTC.com, the average Bitcoin mining hash rate in the last 24 to 3-day period has just been massive and much more than what it was, let's say, May 15th to June 27th, or rather any 14-day interval in the network's history. So the hashing rate is just really, really high right now.
But with all of this in mind, is there any correlation between the price of the cryptocurrency and its hash rate? And Edward, do you agree that it can be used as one of the fundamentals to value?
Absolutely not. This is sort of a pervasive myth that persists in the Bitcoin space, and it goes back to the fact that once upon a time it was true. So back in the early days of Bitcoin, I mean 2009, 10, early 11, the only people mining were people who had Bitcoin wallets who were really into Bitcoin. And back then they were mining on the processors, on their CPUs. So if someone was mining, it was because they had a Bitcoin wallet. And if someone had a Bitcoin wallet, all they had to do was turn it on to start mining. So back then, the amount of hash power we see out there was a good indicator of how many people were active with Bitcoin. Now, since then, mining has moved beyond their CPUs to their graphics cards, and then beyond their graphics cards to application-specific hardware. So people buy special hardware that does nothing but mine the kind of hash power that's used for Bitcoin. Now, once you have people paying lots of money for specialty hardware, it's not people who are necessarily interested in Bitcoin. It's people who are interested in earning those rewards. For them, it's now a profit motive. And we have tons and tons of people out there deploying hardware all over the world, especially in places where they can, rent a large warehouse space and get power cheaply because, they spend a lot of electricity to do this mining. But as Jason points out, with all these people out there, this isn't all people who are super into Bitcoin. A lot of these people are earning this because it's a profit motive and they're following the money. So now the hash power follows price. When price goes up, as it did over the past couple of months, you see the hash power go up as people goes down, as happened last year. We saw in December that the hash rate went down. Now, why would hash rate go down? Is hardware going up in smoke? No. All that happened was that in places in the world where power is more expensive, miners were starting to turn off their rigs because they're not in electricity. So it's strictly a matter of following the revenue. And you can absolutely prove this to yourself. If you go to a site like BitInfo Charts, which will let you track the mining profitability, just bring up a chart of Bitcoin mining profitability versus Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin SV and look at the past couple of weeks, the past month or two. You'll see that the profitability on all three of these is exactly the same. Now, their prices move differently, but every time the price of one of them goes up, their chain attracts a little bit more hash power, and when it attracts more hash power, their difficulty adjusts. So the revenue for mining turns out to be the same across all happen if hash power follows price. Now, of course, Bitcoin is wildly dominant in terms of the amount of hash power it's attracting, because it has a wildly higher price. But the degree to which it has more hash power is exactly proportional to the degree to which it has higher price. Hash power follows price.
So really just following the money, and I guess, like you said, it can't be used to actually value the digital currency.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Okay, so Jason, do you also agree this isn't really the case anymore? This can't actually be done?
So that's true. Hash power does follow price, but you have like all these factors that come into what Bitcoin price, what determines Bitcoin price in the first place. And generally speaking, the perception is, anyways, if it's harder to mine, then it becomes more valuable. Now, even if that's just a perception and not true, because ultimately more hash power is deployed if the price becomes higher. So it's sort of almost circular. But even if there's a perception that the harder it is to mine, the more valuable it becomes, that can raise the price and then again affect everything, downstream. So then, I mean, there are n number of other factors to look at, like transactions, outputs, transaction speeds, volume, that are probably better factors to determine price than hash rates.
Yeah, Jason's right. That psychological influence is always there.
Now, I just want to move on because BitTorrent token jumped by double digits yesterday before giving up most of the gains. And this move did come as Tron announced launching BitTorrent file system testnet. So we're going to go back to you, Edward. How significant is this? And do you see this token as an asset that traders or investors should actually be keeping their eyes on?
I'm not closely following BitTorrent token because I don't think that it's necessarily a strong play. I'm not a huge fan of the model of trying to the internet broadly adopted because they liked it as a free alternative. It's hard to monetize a free alternative. We'll see if they succeed. But I do think this is very significant because of the response that we saw. So when the news came out, we did see that price almost double. So that tells us one of two things is going on. Either it's very thinly traded and there's no liquidity, so just a couple of people trying to buy it up drove the price up dramatically, or a whole lot of people were interested. Maybe it does have good liquidity, but a whole lot of people were interested in acquiring. That shows a lot of speculative interest. It suggests to me, if the latter was the case, it means that there's a lot of people out there who really want to trade now, who really want to potentially invest in things. Now, we can tell that it wasn't really long-term investors going into this because it gave back those gains. So some people jumped in, driving up the price, and then others quickly took advantage of that high price to sell off what they had to bring the price back down to take their profit. So we'll see how it plays out for BitTorrent specifically. But the general activity we're seeing, if you don't assume it's a little pump and dump coin, and there are many little pump and dump coins, but if you don't assume that, it's suggesting that the market is really ripe for news and for opportunities to trade and invest into altcoins. It's a suggestion that, altcoin season may be coming or may be here.
So altcoin season could be here. So really just a ripe opportunity, as you say. So Jason, we're going to come back to you. What are your thoughts? Do you equally think, we'll have to just sort of see how it plays out?
Yeah, I agree. Effect this is have on the market, have on actual and also to what extent it's going to be adopted. It's way too early to know any of that. So any of the money that came in is, again, either speculative and with such tiny liquidity that the price jumped up. It's not because looked at what these people were doing and the thing had actually run for a while, and it showed real promise, and that's why they went in and decided to put their money there. Name Justin Sun is such a huge name that anything that that Justin or Tron is going to be involved in is going to have a lot of hype behind it and a lot of ability to move the market, especially because people are following what he's saying. And he was recently at a conference speaking about this, and so there's a lot of hype behind it. And Tron certainly has the bank balance to sort of do things that a lot of other cryptocurrency companies, especially the smaller ones, are not able to even do. So whatever money did come in was probably speculative, and you can see that quite a bit of that has been extinguished. But the question is to see how this implements out long term and how it actually becomes a significant use case if that were to actually happen. Same with Voice that EOS is doing. I mean, these are just various different hype-driven things that haven't really panned out yet. They haven't really shown actual use cases. But once that actually happens, certainly it's worth looking at. As we were saying, would this be a token worth watching? Yeah, certainly. I think anything that's connected with Tron, or it's connected with EOS, any of these big let's say top 20, top 25 cryptocurrencies, they're probably worth watching what they're doing.
But, you know, speaking of big names and influencing the market, BitMEX CEO Arthur Hayes is going to debate economist and crypto skeptic Nouriel Roubini in 2019 Asia Blockchain Summit tomorrow. So do these debates get some mainstream media, or are these mostly followed by people within the industry? Edward, we're going to come back to you just to finish.
I don't think they get enough mainstream coverage, but they at least get some, and they get some because of people like Nouriel Roubini. You know, not pro-crypto. That's good to have inside the crypto space because A, it leads to debates like this. It leads to honest investigation of the ideas that we're pursuing here. And there's no better way to test your theories than to have a good critic. But also, that'll bring some outside interest because media will only spend so much time looking at the proselytizers from inside the crypto space. They want to hear the pro and con. They always want to show both sides of the issue, sometimes obsessively so. So the fact that Nouriel Roubini is being brought into a blockchain, a crypto skeptic, is great for the attention. Is going to have more of an influence in the long term for Bitcoin's growth and crypto growth than the people inside. Crypto has grown a lot, sort of self-starting itself, sort of bootstrapping itself, growing a crypto community. But broader adoption really relies on the rest of the world, including governments. Now, Bitcoin is sort of a outside the government play. Bitcoin is sort of pan-global, but governments do have a big influence. You know, we were talking about a lot of different influencers over Vays and Justin Sun and now Arthur Hayes and Nouriel Roubini. Sure, these people influence the market, but the government can have an even bigger influence. You know, you can throw away all your TA and your favorite influencers' statements if the U.S. government comes in and makes a strong statement from one of the regulatory agencies that is either very pro-crypto or very anti-crypto. That will really move the market. So it's important to influence those thinkers, and those thinkers aren't influenced by Vays, but they might be influenced by someone like a Nouriel Roubini, especially if he's debating someone like an Arthur Hayes who's going to make good, cogent arguments. If we can help make a good argument for Bitcoin in front of a Nouriel Roubini, in front of the governments of the world, and I think that's a very good thing.
Very, very interesting, you know, just sort of working out that chain of influence there and actually saying, well, you know, the typical people that we might think of, like Vays, well, actually, they aren't the people when it comes to mass adoption that we want to be influencing. And of course, Jason, we're going to finish just by coming to you. What are your thoughts?
So yeah, I mean, I agree with Edward. It's absolutely useful to have somebody like Nouriel Roubini to come in and debate the crypto community. I just don't think that a lot of these debates are actually followed very much outside the crypto community. I mean, to some extent they are, but not as they don't get as much attention as you'd imagine. And so I think it's a limited utility to the people in the community to debate crypto skeptics because ultimately the people paying attention are already on board with crypto, and in a sense they're sort of preaching to the converted. So to me, I much prefer the sort of in a crypto discussions where you have Bitcoin SV versus Bitcoin Cash, those sort of debates by the people that run those companies or that are sort of influencers in those areas, as opposed to like debating crypto skeptics, because I'm not really sure that there's just not that gets as much mainstream coverage. I mean, it would be great if that's true. If it did, I agree with Edward. That's what you need. I'm just not really. I'm not really sure. I see a lot of mainstream coverage on those sort of debates.
I guess we'll have to see how the likes of Bloomberg and CNBC pick up on that tomorrow. But for now, Edward, Jason, it's been an absolute pleasure having both of you on the show with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The pleasure was mine.
Always. Now, before we sign off, I do have a last-minute update from our editorial staff regarding the crypto market. The total market capitalization is rising gradually as it climbs back towards the $300 billion territory. Trading activity has increased slightly, and the coin market cap website's daily traded volume is on a move towards the $100 billion mark. The 10K psychological level. Well, that is all for this Tuesday's Crypto Now live show. We thank Edward and Jason for their expert analysis. We thank the audience for joining us and invite you all to accompany us every weekday at the same time.